If you're watching this, you're already too close. I don't know how you found this or why you're still here, but you need to listen carefully. There's a house on a lake in rural Wisconsin that has been sold 3 times in the last decade, and every time the same thing happens. A young couple moves in, hopeful, excited, thinking they've found something special. And every time, it's the wife who stops sleeping. At first, it's just restlessness. Then it becomes something else. Something watching, waiting, pulling, and then she's gone. They always say it was stress, isolation, maybe the water. They always find a reason, but they never find her. I've read stories like this before. I didn't believe them either. Not until I lived it. Not until I realized the pattern wasn't coincidence. It was selection. If you're still listening, you might think this is just another one of those stories. Something exaggerated, polished, shaped to scare you. It's not. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to warn you. Because someone just moved into that house again. A new couple. Young, happy, exactly like we were. And if you've seen the listing, if you've ever scrolled past a lakeside property that felt too good to be true, then you need to hear this. Because this isn't over. It doesn't end when you leave. It doesn't end when you look away. It waits, and it remembers. I'm telling you this because it's happening again. Because someone else is already inside. Because I didn't listen when I had the chance. And because if you ignore this, you might be next. This started when we bought the house. I remember thinking we were lucky, like we'd beaten the system. A house on the water for less than our rent. It felt like a miracle. It was. It was an invitation. And the worst part is it never forces you. It just waits for you to come closer, to lean in, to listen, to want it. That's how it gets you. That's how it got me. And it's your turn. I met Ethan when we were both still pretending we had everything figured out. College, late nights, cheap takeout, plans that sounded solid until reality started pressing in. By the time we got married, those plans had narrowed into something simpler. Survive the city, pay the rent, try to build a life that didn't feel like it was slipping through our fingers. We were happy. That part matters. We were the kind of happy that makes you believe the hard parts are temporary, that everything is just one good decision away from falling into place. Our apartment in Milwaukee was small, overpriced, and loud in ways that never quite let you rest. The walls were thin enough that I could hear our neighbor's TV through the night, the same laugh track repeating like it was stitched into the building itself. Ethan worked its support an hour outside the city, and every morning he drove through traffic that seemed designed to wear him down. So we started talking about leaving, not in a dramatic way, not all at once, just small conversations at first, more space, less noise, somewhere I could work from home without feeling like I was boxed in, somewhere Ethan could fish on weekends instead of staring at screens all day. The house showed up in early May. 3 bedrooms, a lake, a dock, a porch that faced the water like something out of a catalog. And the price should have scared me. It was so far below what we'd budgeted that I checked the listing 3 times, convinced it had to be fake. It was. It was real, and it was waiting. Our realtor didn't say much about the previous owners, just that they'd relocated for work and wanted a quick sale. I asked once casually why they'd left so suddenly. She smiled in that practiced way and repeated the same answer, softer this time, like it would settle better. I remember feeling something then. Not fear exactly, just a pause. A moment where I could have pushed further, asked better questions, looked a little deeper. I didn't, because I wanted it. That's the part I keep coming back to. It wasn't like we were tricked. There wasn't some elaborate lie or hidden clause. The house was exactly what it looked like. Beautiful, quiet, perfect. The kind of place people dream about when they're stuck somewhere they don't belong. We told ourselves we were lucky, that we'd found something rare before anyone else could take it, that sometimes things just work out. Looking back, I think that's how it starts. Not with fear, not with anything obvious, just a decision you want to make badly enough that you stop asking why. We signed the papers a week later, packed up everything we owned, drove out of the city like we were leaving something behind for good. And for a while, it felt like we had. For 4 months, it was perfect. For a while, it really was everything we'd hoped for. That's what makes this part so hard to explain, because nothing felt wrong at the beginning. If anything, it felt like we had somehow stepped into a better version of our lives without earning it. The lake was the center of everything. It wasn't huge, but it was wide enough that you could see the far shore as a thin line of trees, especially in the evenings when the light softened and everything looked like it belonged in a painting. The water near the dock was clear, almost impossibly clean, with a sandy bottom you could see through the surface. I used to stand at the edge and look down at my reflection, the sky behind me, the faint shapes of fish moving just out of reach. I swam almost every day that summer. The water was cold at first, the kind that shocks your body into stillness, but once you pushed through that, it felt smooth and weightless. Ethan would sit on the dock with a fishing rod, half paying attention, half lost in his own thoughts. Sometimes he'd call out something sarcastic about how I was taking too long to get in, and I'd splash water in his direction that never quite reached him. It was simple, easy, exactly what we wanted. The cats adjusted slower. Poppy had always been nervous, the kind of animal that treated every new space like a potential threat. She stayed inside, watching everything through the windows like it was a carefully staged performance. Noodle, on the other hand, acted like the house had always been his. He sprawled wherever he wanted, stretched out in patches of sunlight, completely indifferent to the change. There was a rhythm to our days that settled in quickly. Mornings with coffee on the porch. Afternoons where the heat made everything feel suspended in time. Evenings on the dock, watching the sky shift through colors that never looked the same twice. It was the kind of life people talk about when they say they want something slower, something real. We met the neighbor about a week after we moved in. He came by carrying a jar of homemade pickles, introduced himself in a way that felt both friendly and distant at the same time. His name was Darth, or at least that's what it sounded like. He'd lived on the lake most of his life and spoke about it with a familiarity that bordered on ownership. He told us small things at first, how the lake was spring-fed, how it stayed cold even in the height of summer, how there were places where the bottom dropped off suddenly, deeper than anyone had properly measured. He mentioned, almost casually, that it never fully froze in winter, that there was always a section in the middle that stayed open. Black water, even in the coldest months. I remember asking him if he ever swam out there, toward the deeper part. He didn't answer right away, just looked past me toward the lake like he was measuring something I couldn't see. Then he shook his head once and said, "No need." At the time, I didn't think much of it. People have their quirks, especially out in places like that. But looking back, I realized there was something else in the way he said it. Not fear exactly, more like certainty. The lake changed at night. During the day, it reflected everything, the sky, the trees, the movement of the wind. But after sunset, that reflection disappeared. The surface went flat, almost featureless, like it had lost its depth. It didn't shimmer or ripple the way you'd expect. It just absorbed the light. It didn't look like water at night. It looked like a hole. A wide, perfectly shaped absence in the middle of the landscape, where anything beneath the surface simply stopped existing. I mentioned it to Ethan once, trying to explain the way it made me feel, and he laughed it off. Said I was overthinking it, letting the quiet get to me. Maybe I was, because everything else was still perfect. At least it seemed that way. That's when small things started happening. The first time I noticed something was off, it was small enough to ignore. That's how it begins, I think. Not with something undeniable, but with something easy to explain away if you want to. I woke up one morning and found the sliding glass door to the back porch open just a few inches. Not wide enough to be obvious, just enough to let in a thin line of air. I remember standing there, staring at it longer than I should have, trying to decide if it had always been like that. The latch on that door wasn't perfect. You had to push it firmly to get it to catch. If you didn't, it could drift open on its own. So that's what I told myself. Ethan said the same thing when I mentioned it. Probably the wind. Probably didn't close it all the way. It made sense. It was simple. And simple explanations are comforting when you don't want to look deeper. But there was something else that morning. Something I couldn't explain as easily. A smell. At first, it was faint. Just a hint of something off in the air, like water that had been sitting too long. Not strong enough to identify, not strong enough to linger. It disappeared before I could even decide if it was real. I opened the windows, let the air move through the house, and by midday it was gone. I didn't think about it again until it came back. A few days later, I noticed it in the hallway that led to the back of the house, the same hallway that ended at that sliding glass door. It was stronger this time, not overwhelming but distinct. A damp, organic smell, like lake water pulled up from somewhere deeper, mixed with something that had been left to decay. I cleaned everything I could think of, floors, counters, even the baseboards along the walls. For a while, it seemed to help. The smell would fade, retreat just enough that I could convince myself it had been nothing. But it always came back. It always started at that door. Poppy noticed it before I did, or maybe she understood it in a way I couldn't. She had begun avoiding the hallway entirely. At first, it was subtle. She'd walk toward it, slow down, then stop short like she'd hit an invisible boundary. Then she started sitting there, just at the edge of the hallway, staring straight down toward the glass door. She wouldn't move. Hours sometimes, completely still except for the faint twitch of her tail. If I called her, she'd look at me, then back at the hallway like she was trying to decide which direction mattered more. There was a low sound she made, almost a growl but quieter, uneasy. Noodle didn't react at all. He wandered through the same space without hesitation, stretched out near the door like nothing was wrong. That contrast should have reassured me. It should have made it easier to dismiss Poppy's behavior as just one of her quirks. It didn't, because every time I walked down that hallway, I felt it too. Not the smell, not exactly. Something else. A pressure almost, like the air was heavier there. Like I was stepping into a space that didn't quite belong to the rest of the house. I'd find myself glancing at the glass door without meaning to, expecting to see something on the other side. There was never anything there. Just the lake, still, silent, watching in a way that didn't make sense. I started checking the door every night before bed, making sure the latch caught, making sure it stayed closed. It became a habit without me realizing it, something I did automatically, like turning off the lights or locking the front door. I never told Ethan how much it bothered me, because I didn't have a reason, not a real one, just a feeling. And feelings are easy to dismiss when everything else still looks normal. But that feeling didn't go away. It grew, and then the sound started. The first night I heard it, I almost didn't wake up fully. It slipped into my sleep like part of a dream, soft, rhythmic, just enough to pull me toward consciousness without snapping me awake. For a few seconds, I lay there with my eyes closed, trying to place it. Then I realized it was coming from outside. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving along the wooden planks of the dock. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, listening. The sound was unmistakable once I focused on it. Wet steps, not the hollow knock of dry wood under shoes, but something heavier, damp, like bare feet coming out of water and pressing against the surface with weight behind them. They moved from the far end of the dock toward the shore, each step measured, unhurried. Then they stopped. I held my breath, waiting for something else. A voice, a splash, anything. Nothing came. After a few seconds, I nudged Ethan awake, whispering his name. He stirred, annoyed, asking what was wrong. By the time he was fully alert, the sound was gone. The night had settled back into that same stillness, like nothing had happened at all. "It's probably the wood," he said after a moment, his voice thick with sleep. "Temperature changes. It expands, contracts, makes noise." I wanted to believe that. It sounded reasonable. It fit neatly into the world I understood. So I let it go. But the next night, it happened again. This time I was already half awake when it started. The same pattern, wet steps moving along the dock, slow, intentional, stopping at the exact same place near the shore. I didn't wake Ethan. I just listened. After the footsteps stopped, there was a pause, a long one, long enough that I thought it was over. Then I heard something else. A dragging sound. Soft at first, almost too faint to catch. But once I noticed it, I couldn't unhear it. Something heavy being pulled across the ground. Grass shifting under weight. The sound moved from the edge of the dock toward the house, slow and uneven, like whatever it was didn't move the way it should. I lay there frozen, staring into the dark. It stopped somewhere in the yard. After that, nothing. No return footsteps. No sound of it going back into the water. Just silence. Something came out of the lake and stayed. I didn't sleep much after that. The pattern repeated every night. Footsteps, pause, dragging, silence. Always the same, always ending somewhere between the shore and the house. During the day, everything looked normal. The yard was undisturbed. The dock dry and quiet, like it had never held anything heavier than Ethan's fishing gear. I started to question myself, wondering if I was filling in gaps, letting my imagination stretch something ordinary into something else. Until the morning, I found the trail. It started at the waterline, exactly where the dock met the shore. The grass there was flattened, pressed down in a wide path that cut across the yard. Not footprints, not something you could easily define. Just a disturbed strip, maybe 3 feet across, like something broad and heavy had been dragged over it. I followed it slowly, my stomach tightening with each step. It led straight to the sliding glass door. And it stopped there. No marks leading away. No indication of where it had gone after that. Just an ending point, as if whatever had made it had reached the house and disappeared. I called Ethan outside and showed him. He stood there for a long moment, studying the ground, then shrugged in that careful way people do when they don't want to validate what you're thinking. "Could be an animal," he said. "A deer maybe, or something got caught and dragged itself." "A deer doesn't leave a trail like this," I said. He didn't argue. He just looked at me, then back at the yard, like he was trying to decide which version of reality was easier to live with. By the time we went back inside, the grass had already started to lift, the shape of the trail softening under the morning light. By evening, it was almost gone. But I knew what I'd seen. And that night, when the footsteps came again, I didn't pretend it was anything else. Because I was starting to understand something. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. And whatever it was getting closer. Then I finally saw it. I didn't mean to see it. That's the part that still bothers me. The idea that whatever this is, it wasn't meant to be revealed all at once. Like catching something mid-act, something that would have stayed hidden if I had just followed the same routine we'd built over those quiet, perfect months. It was a little past midnight when I woke up. No sound, no nightmare, nothing obvious. Just that sudden, unnatural awareness, like being pulled to the surface of sleep by something that didn't belong there. The room felt wrong immediately. Not colder, not warmer, just occupied. Beside me, Daniel was still asleep. I could hear his breathing, slow and even, completely unaware. And then I heard it. A soft, wet sound. Not from inside the house. From the lake. I don't know why I got up. I should have stayed in bed. I should have shaken him awake and told him something wasn't right. But instead, I moved quietly, almost carefully, like I didn't want whatever was out there to know I was coming. The hallway smelled stronger that night. Thick, rotting, like something had been dragged in and left to decay just out of sight. Poppy was sitting at the edge of the hallway, frozen, not growling this time, not even hissing, just staring. Watching. I followed her gaze. The back door was open. Not wide, just enough. And beyond it, the dock. I stepped outside before I could stop myself. The grass was wet under my feet, not with dew. It clung differently, heavier, like the ground itself had been soaked. The lake was completely still. And then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shape, a trick of the darkness, something my eyes were forcing into existence because I expected to see something there. But it moved. Slowly. Wrong. It was crouched at the far end of the dock, low and heavy, like it didn't understand how its own body was supposed to hold itself. Its surface, its skin, I think, reflected just enough light to look wet but not like water, more like something that had been in the water too long. Something that had softened. It shifted and I heard that dragging sound again, the same one from the nights before. Wet against wood, thick, deliberate. I couldn't see a face. I don't think it had one, not in the way we understand. But I knew it was aware of me. Not because it turned. Because it stopped. Completely. Like it was listening. Time slipped after that. I remember blinking. I remember thinking I should run. I remember opening my mouth to call for Daniel. And then, I was standing in the kitchen. The lights were off. My hands were shaking, but I didn't remember moving. I didn't remember leaving the yard. I didn't remember closing the door. The clock on the microwave read 1:47 a.m. I had gone outside just after midnight. 40 minutes. Gone. At first I thought I'd blacked out, that maybe I'd sleepwalked or panicked, or something my brain was trying to protect me from. But then I noticed the floor. Wet footprints, leading from the back door, across the kitchen, into the hallway. Not mine. Too large, too uneven. And then I heard it. A soft click. Behind me. I turned slowly. The back door was closing. Not slamming. Not forced. Just gently, like someone who knew exactly how much pressure it took to latch it without making a sound. I stared at it, my chest tightening, my thoughts struggling to catch up to what I was seeing. Because I hadn't closed it. I hadn't even touched it. Which meant something else had. And the worst part, it didn't break in. It didn't force its way inside. It didn't need to. It knew how to get in. Like it had done it before. Like it had always known. And as I stood there, frozen, staring at that door, I realized something that made everything else feel smaller, almost irrelevant. The footsteps didn't stop in the hallway. They continued. Deeper. Further into the house. That's when it stopped being outside. The first time I woke up outside, I convinced myself it was nothing. That's important, because if you're listening to this and thinking you'd react differently, you wouldn't. Not at first. Your brain protects you by lying, by smoothing over the cracks before you even realize they're there. I woke up standing at the edge of the lake. Barefoot. The water was inches from my toes, black and still, reflecting nothing. Not the sky, not the house behind me, just absence. For a few seconds I didn't move. I didn't think. I just stood there like I had been placed there carefully, deliberately. Then the cold hit me. Not from the air. From inside my chest, spreading outward like something realizing I was awake. I stumbled back, my heart racing, trying to piece together how I got there. The last thing I remembered was lying in bed next to Daniel. The door had been locked. I was sure of it. I always checked it now. Always. When I turned back toward the house, I saw the door. Closed. Locked. I know it was locked because I ran to it and tried the handle, half expecting it to swing open. It didn't. I had to reach into the flower pot where we kept the spare key. I had to let myself in. Think about that. I wasn't locked out. I had locked myself out, and I had no memory of doing it. That was the first time. It didn't stay the last. After that, it started happening more often, not every night. That would have been too obvious, too easy to explain. Instead, it spaced itself out, just enough for me to doubt it. I'd wake up in places that made no sense. In the hallway, staring at that door. In the kitchen, my hand resting on the counter like I'd been waiting for something. Once, I woke up sitting at the end of the dock. That time, my feet were in the water. I don't remember walking there. I don't remember opening the door. But I remember the feeling when I realized where I was. Not fear. Not exactly. It was worse than that. It felt familiar. Like I'd been there longer than I should have been. Like waking up didn't interrupt anything. It just made me aware of it. That's when I started locking everything. Deadbolts, windows. I even pushed a chair against the back door one night just to hear it if it moved. It didn't help, because the next morning I woke up outside again. The chair was still in place. The lock was still turned, and the door was still closed. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no scratches, nothing that made sense. Just me, standing in the yard like I belonged there. Daniel started noticing something was wrong, but not the right thing. "You're stressed," he said. "It's the move, new environment, it happens." So I went to a doctor. I told him everything. Well, not everything. Not about the thing on the dock. Not about the footsteps that only came from one direction. I told him I was sleepwalking, that I was waking up outside without remembering how I got there. He didn't seem concerned. "Adults can develop it under stress," he said. "It's rare but not unheard of." He gave me advice. Reduce anxiety, maintain a routine, avoid screens before bed. Like that was the problem. Like this was something my brain was doing to itself. If this sounds insane, I know. That's exactly how it works. It makes you sound unreliable. It gives you just enough normal explanations to hide behind so no one takes the rest seriously. Even you. Especially you. Because part of me wanted to believe him. It would have been easier to think this was chemical, temporary, fixable. But deep down I knew. Because it wasn't dragging me out there. That would have been simpler. There would have been bruises, marks, something to prove I was being forced. But there was. I was walking. Willingly. Every step. Like I was following something I couldn't see when I was awake. Like there was a version of me that understood exactly where I needed to go and why. And that version was getting stronger. The worst part wasn't the walking. It was what I started to feel when I woke up. Not confusion. Not panic. Something else. Something quieter. A sense of interruption. Like I'd been in the middle of something important. Something I wasn't supposed to remember. And then, one morning, I realized it wasn't just taking control of my body. It was taking something else too. Something I didn't notice was missing until it was already gone. Then it took something from me. Poppy disappeared on a Tuesday. There wasn't anything dramatic about it at first. No noise, no sign of struggle, she just wasn't there. One minute she was curled up on the back of the couch, watching the yard like she always did, alert, tense, like she was tracking something only she could see. The next she was gone. We searched the house first. Every room, every closet, under the bed, behind the washer, inside cabinets she'd never even opened before. Nothing. Daniel checked outside, called her name like that would do anything. I didn't follow him at first. I already knew where she was. I don't know how I knew. That's the part I can't explain without sounding like I've already lost it. But there was this pull, the same one I'd been feeling in my sleep. Quiet, certain. Leading toward the lake. I walked down to the dock slowly, like I was delaying the moment I'd have to confirm it. The water was still. Too still. And then I saw her, floating just beneath the surface. Not drifting, not moving with the water. Just suspended. Her fur looked untouched, dry almost, like the lake hadn't soaked into her the way it should have. Her eyes were open but not clouded, not the way they're supposed to be. She didn't look dead. She looked paused. I don't remember deciding to go in after her. 1 second I was standing on the dock, staring. The next I was in the water. It was colder than it should have been, not freezing but dense, like pushing through something thicker than water, something that resisted. I reached for her. My fingers brushed her fur. And that's when it happened. Something grabbed me. Not brushed against me. Not tangled. Grabbed. A hand. There's no other way to describe it. It wrapped around my wrist with a grip that was too firm, too deliberate to be anything else. I didn't see it clearly. The water distorted everything, turned shapes into something unreal, but I felt it. The pressure. The intent. It pulled. Not hard, not violently. Just enough to let me know it could. My chest locked up. Panic hit all at once, sharp and overwhelming. I tried to jerk back, but the grip tightened for a second, just a second before releasing me completely. I shot backward, scrambling onto the dock, coughing, shaking, my heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Poppy's body drifted closer to the surface. Like nothing had happened. Like whatever had touched me didn't need to hide anymore. I didn't tell Daniel what I felt. I told him I slipped, that the water was colder than I expected, that I panicked. He believed me. Because the alternative didn't make sense. Because it wasn't supposed to. But I knew. It touched me. Not by accident. Not blindly. It knew exactly where I was. And now it knew I could feel it. That was the first time. But not the last. After that, it escalated. It didn't happen all at once. If it had, I think I would have broken sooner. Or maybe I would have left, packed a bag, dragged Daniel out with me, and never looked back. But that's not how it works. It adjusts. Learns. The first time I heard Poppy after we buried her, I was in the kitchen. It was late. I couldn't sleep anymore, not properly. Nights had turned into this stretched, restless state where I was never fully awake, never fully gone. I was standing at the sink when I heard it. A soft, familiar sound. A meow. I froze. It came again, quiet, insistent. From the hallway. For a second, just a second, I let myself believe it. That we'd been wrong. That maybe she hadn't been dead. That maybe I'd imagined what I saw in the lake. I turned slowly, my chest tightening, my mind already trying to stitch together something that made sense. "Poppy," I said. The sound stopped. The hallway was empty. But the smell was there. Thick, rotting, close. And then, another meow. Closer this time. Right at the edge of the hallway, just beyond where the light from the kitchen reached. I didn't move. Because something about it was off. It sounded right, exactly like her. But it didn't feel right. There was no life in it, no variation, no instinct behind it. Just repetition. Like something replaying a sound it didn't understand. I stepped back instead of forward. And the moment I did, the sound stopped completely. like it had been waiting to see what I'd choose. After that, it got bolder. Handprints started appearing on the glass doors facing the lake. Not during the night, during the day. I'd walk into the living room and see them there, smudged, wet, too large to be mine, pressed against the outside like someone had been standing there, watching. They never led anywhere. No footprints, no trail. Just the prints themselves. Proof without explanation. And then there was the bed. Every morning, without fail, my side of it was damp. At first, I told myself it was sweat, stress, night terrors, anything that sounded remotely normal. But it wasn't sweat. It smelled like the lake. That same thick, rotting scent that clung to the hallway, to the door, to everything it touched. It wasn't just reaching me outside anymore. It was bringing the lake inside. Bringing it to me. And the worst part, I stopped fighting it. Not consciously, not at first. But the dreams changed. They stopped being chaotic, fragmented things I couldn't remember. They became clear. Calm. I'd find myself standing on the dock, the lake perfectly still, the air quiet in a way that felt safe. There was no fear there. No smell. No sense of being watched. Just the water. Waiting. And something in me wanted to go in. Not because I was forced. Because it felt right. Like stepping into it would fix something. Like it would answer everything I didn't understand. It didn't want to scare me anymore. It didn't need to. Fear makes you run. But comfort makes you stay. It makes you listen. It makes you step closer. And every time I woke up from those dreams, I felt it again, that quiet, lingering pull. Stronger now, clearer. Like it was teaching me. Preparing me. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just haunting the house. It was changing me. Shaping the way I thought, the way I felt. The way I chose. And I realized something I should have understood much earlier. This wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It had a pattern, a purpose, and if I wanted even the smallest chance of stopping it, I needed to understand it. I needed answers. We found the newspaper clipping tucked inside a kitchen drawer the day after the first night she went missing. It was yellowed at the edges, like it had been sitting there far longer than it should have. The headline didn't make sense at first until I read it twice and felt my stomach drop. Local woman drowns in private estate pool. Husband reports accident. But there was no pool on the property. I remember standing there, reading it over and over, trying to convince myself it belonged to someone else. That's when the neighbor finally came over. He looked at me like I already knew. He didn't even ask what was wrong. He just pointed at the house and said, "It's happening again, isn't it?" I didn't answer, but my silence must have been enough, because he sighed like he'd seen it too many times before. He told me every few years a new couple moves in, and every time it starts the same way. New house, fresh hope. Then the wife disappears, always the wife. I asked him why no one ever leaves sooner. He shook his head like that question had no answer anyone liked. Then he said the part I can't forget. "Leave now, not later, not tomorrow. Now." He said it so quietly it felt like a threat rather than advice. I asked him what happens if people don't leave. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked past me at the house and whispered, "It's never different." That's when I felt it. This wasn't just a warning, it was experience. I went back inside and checked every room again. Nothing had changed, but everything felt wrong now. I found myself staring at the bathroom longer than I should have. The water in the tub looked darker than I remembered, like it was waiting. That's when I understood the pattern wasn't about death. It was about replacement. This isn't the first story like this, just the one you're hearing. And the neighbor knew it would keep happening after we left. I kept thinking about the newspaper again. Every detail felt like it had been waiting for me specifically. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that I wasn't the first person to stand in that kitchen holding that same article. But I might be the first one who noticed the pattern before it finished. That thought didn't comfort me. It made everything worse, because noticing it meant I was already part of it. So we decided to leave. Not because we were brave, but because staying felt like becoming the next entry in a story that had already been written without us. And there was no arguing with that. Anyway, I should have known the silence that night wasn't normal. It felt like the house was holding its breath while we packed, like it was waiting to see what we would choose. There were no creaks in the walls, no distant settling sounds, nothing. Even the wind outside seemed to avoid the property entirely. We moved quietly at first, stuffing clothes into bags without speaking. Every object we touched felt heavier than it should have, as if it resisted being taken away. I remember pausing in the hallway, listening for something, anything, but there was only that suffocating calm. It wasn't peace, it was anticipation, like the house already knew the outcome and was simply watching us arrive at it. We told ourselves we were leaving before sunrise, that we just needed to get through the night, but the night didn't feel like something we were passing through. It felt like something that was passing through us. At some point, I must have fallen asleep without realizing it. One moment I was sitting on the edge of the bed, and the next there was water everywhere. Cold, absolute, endless. I was in a lake. There was no house, no room, no walls. Just black water stretching in every direction, and a sky so dark it felt like it had been erased. I tried to move, but the water didn't behave like water. It was too still, too aware. Every motion I made felt delayed, like something underneath was thinking before allowing it. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a shape circling me in the distance. Slow, patient, not swimming like anything human would. It moved like it belonged there more than the water itself did. I tried to call out, but my voice didn't carry. It sank. The shape came closer. And then I understood it wasn't just circling me. It was studying me. A voice formed in my head before I ever saw a face. Not words exactly, more like thoughts that didn't belong to me pressing against my mind in soft waves. No fear, no struggle, just rest. It told me I didn't need to run anymore, that I was finally where I was meant to be. The water around me grew warmer. Not physically at first, but emotionally, like memory itself was softening. I felt exhaustion I didn't know I had, and beneath it, something dangerously close to relief. It doesn't take you, you choose it. The thought wasn't mine, but it felt true anyway. Like it had always been true, and I was only now remembering it. The shape rose closer, and I saw fragments of something that looked almost like a face, but not formed correctly. Not meant for recognition. And yet, it felt familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. It didn't come to hurt me, it came to understand me. The lake didn't feel like drowning, it felt like being accepted. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Time stopped making sense. The water, the voice, the presence, they all blurred together into something that felt like home. A wrong kind of home, but still home. A ripple of resistance formed in the water around me, like something outside this place was pulling against it. Distant memories flickered, packing bags, whispered warnings, the feeling that we were not supposed to stay even one more second. I tried to hold on to them, but they slipped like wet paper tearing apart in my hands. The warmth tried to convince me to let go, to stop fighting, to stop remembering why I ever wanted to leave at all. Even after leaving the water, I could still feel it trying to follow my thoughts, like it hadn't accepted the interruption. The warmth lingered in my skin, whispering that I had made a mistake by resisting it, that I would eventually understand I was safer there than anywhere else I could go, and that leaving had never truly meant escaping it at all, not even then now. And then I saw movement above the surface, a ripple, a break in the stillness. A sound cut through everything, my name. Something pulled violently, ripping me out of the water, out of the warmth, out of the silence that had started to feel like comfort. And as I was dragged upward, I saw it clearly for the first time, fully. The thing in the water didn't look angry. It looked disappointed. Then Ethan pulled me out.